So, now I'd like to shift gears a bit and introduce our guest speaker, Eric Saperston. Eric is our kind of man, obsessed with being extraordinary. I dare say he studied this with fervor, just like we study what it takes to be successful in sales. For over 20 years, Eric has interviewed world leaders, tycoons, visionaries, and pioneers to understand the common traits that make them successful. You'll hear some of yourself in his lessons, I'm sure. And you'll hear even more that you can learn from and emulate. Without further ado, Eric Saperston.
Aloha. My name is Eric Saperston, and this is my story. I grew up in San Diego, California. I went to San Diego State University. When I graduated, I decided to take a year off, challenged by my mentor to make the trip more meaningful. I set off on a journey based on an old Chinese proverb: to know the road ahead, ask those coming back. I'd call up some of the most powerful people in the world and ask them out for a cup of coffee.
I am calling the former president of the United States.
So when I told my parents of my plans, they weren't too eager to fund it. So I had to come up with a creative way to keep the dream alive. So any of you folks take road trips, travel across America? Well, maybe you've seen me and not remembered. Because how I funded my trip is I would pull into rest areas with my Coleman stove, and I would sell sexy kind grilled cheese sandwiches made with love for $1. Well, guess what? People actually bought my sandwiches. And not only did they give me money, they also told me where I could go, in a good way. Places to visit, monuments to see, and they even gave me names and numbers of some of the most extraordinary people on the planet that I could call and take out for a cup of coffee.
Grab my shoes.
The reason? To find out the values they live by, the struggles they've endured, and what advice and counsel they would give to better prepare ourselves for the road ahead.
Your mind knows only some things. Your inner voice, your instinct knows everything.
I spent almost 4 years traveling across the country in a Volkswagen bus with 3 of my friends. We shot over 500 hours of footage, interviewed over 200 of the most extraordinary people on the planet.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, now get the hell out of here.
John Steinbeck has a great quote. He said, "Sometimes you take a trip, and sometimes the trip takes you." Well, this trip has taken me well beyond anything I had imagined. And now I find myself in Maui, Hawaii, with one prime directive: to inspire the world to live in wonder.
For our time today, what I've been invited to do is to share a little bit about my story and my background and what I've learned, and to, I know how important it is to provide value. I know that that's a big part of your culture and mine too. So my intention today is to provide as much value as I can in the time that we have. The story that I'd like to begin with is a story about one of the hardest interviews that I had to get. It took me 3 months of cold calling literally every other day to get an interview with President Jimmy Carter. I had to call his press secretary, and I would call and I would tell her a bad joke. I would be on the side of the road with a payphone, and I would be sitting, hold on just a second, and I'd let a semi go by and let her hear it. I would tell her that I was traveling and selling sexy kind grilled cheese sandwiches made with love off my Coleman stove to fund my trip. And I would tell her that I really would love to take President Carter out for a cup of coffee. I've made enough money on my journey to treat for that. But if he orders anything else on the menu, he's on his own. And if they, she chuckled, but she said, "I'm sorry, it's not going to happen." And I know that you folks feel the same way as I do, that sometimes I think people say yes to me because they believe in the vision. Other times I think people say yes to me because they just want me to stop calling. And I have learned, as well as I'm sure you have, that there is a fine line between being persistent and bothersome, and I've had to walk that line. But I was really blessed. After several 90 days of calling President Carter's office, I was awarded this wonderful opportunity to get a chance to meet him. I had, just prior to that, in preparation for that interview, I went to Emory University where he was invited to speak, and the president of Emory got up there and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you the former president of the United States, Mr. Jimmy Carter, the only man who's ever used the presidency as a stepping stone to greater things." And I thought, how beautiful of an introduction. I can't wait to meet this man. I got a chance to go to his mock Oval Office that he had at the Presidential Library, and I sat down, and it was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences. I had to be vetted by security. I was squeezed in between a CNN interview and then him flying off to Ghana. You can imagine that all the normalcy and top camera crews, and then I walk, the bus people are here, and then I come in, and I remember having all these notes because it was the first time I don't know if you guys have ever met a president. It's the first time I've met a president, and so I wanted to come across intelligent, and I had written all these really powerful questions down, and when President Carter came in and sat down with me, I looked at my notes and I couldn't read them. And I'm not kidding, it was like just a moment of I could not read them. And everyone in the room, there was all this fanfare, like when we sat down, and then there's this awkward pause and they're waiting for me to do something. And I'm trying to conjure up something intelligent to say. And what came out was, "Do you know any good jokes?" Carrie Harmon, the press secretary's, I just saw her jaw drop. And then another awkward pause. And then President Carter was gracious enough to fill the space and said, "I'm not a very good joke teller, but I'll tell you a funny story." He said, "I was in Osaka, Japan, speaking to an audience like this, and I had a translator, and I decided that I would tell a joke. And I don't normally do that, but I told this joke to the audience. The translator translated, and then everyone in the crowd started laughing hysterically." And President Carter told that joke before, but he'd never gotten such a rousing response. And he couldn't wait till the talk was over and to go into the green room and talk to this translator and go, "Well, how did you tell that joke?" And he finally got to the translator and said, what did you tell them? And the translator said, "I said, President Carter said a funny story, everybody laugh." In that moment, I just had a great appreciation for that man. I realized that he was just like you and me, putting his pants on the same way we do. And he just happened to have followed a set of guiding principles and values and put himself out there, and through a range of mentors and help and wisdom and learning and sacrifice and dedication, he became a president of the United States. I asked him, I said, given that you have been a world leader, what do you want to share with the rest of us that maybe we're not thinking about? And he didn't miss a beat. He said, look, it's easy to become cynical and resigned, disconnected. It's easy to convince yourself that you don't count, you don't matter, what you do won't make a real dent. And he said, absolutely not. He said, if I have an opportunity to share anything to people, to your audience, I would tell them to never, ever, ever underestimate the power of the individual to make a difference. It is always a person who has the courage to stand for an injustice, stand for a solution, stand for a better world, and courageously speaks that possibility into existence. You folks are here to celebrate your powerful voice. This room is a celebration of the best of the best. People who have believed that you can make a difference, and you have. And for that, I say hooray, and I would like the 300 to stand up, and let's give them applause. Stand up for me, please. One of my favorite quotes that I learned on the journey is this: when you drink the water, remember who dug the well. And for that, I would like the spouses to stand up for your support. Another story that I would like to share with you. I was traveling in my Volkswagen bus. I was feeling pretty good. I had met President Carter. I had met Maya Angelou. I had the privilege of going backstage and meeting Jerry Garcia. I had just got invited to speak for the Coretta Scott King and the Martin Luther King National Conference on Service for the AmeriCorps volunteers. Feeling kind of like I was onto something. Still, this was before a movie, this was before any accolades, this was just me trusting my instincts and trying to figure out how I could turn this into something. When I told my dad, I called home right after my President Carter interview, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe, my mom and dad, I just got a chance to meet President Carter. This is, it was amazing. And my dad said, has anybody written you a check yet? So, a lot of people weren't sure this was going to amount into anything, but I was feeling good about myself, and I'm driving down the road in my Volkswagen bus. This is before I brought in the team of people, and my dog was in the front seat where he would sit, and his head was out the window, with his tongue out, and we're driving down the road. And I pull up to a stoplight, and I look over, and there is a red 308 GTS Ferrari. The one like Magnum PI drove. And I look at that Ferrari, and the journey for me has never been about financial success. It has been about talking to people who get up excited and go to bed fulfilled, who've been living extraordinary lives for decades, who are revered and respected by their peers, and who are really the wise elders of our society. And that's who I was seeking, yet I saw this Ferrari and just had this intuitive hit to follow it. Now, that was difficult in its own right, since I have a Volkswagen bus. But thank God there was a lot of traffic that day, and I could keep up. So I'm driving along, and we get to the next stoplight, and I lean over, and I yell out the window to the guy in the car. I go, hey, dude, you want to race? And he just laughed, and then he drove on. I continued to follow him, and then a few more lights, he pulled into a tire shop. And I waited patiently for him to come out. And then when he came out, I walked up to him and I said, hey, my name's Eric Saperston. I'm traveling around the country. I'm calling up some of the most powerful and amazing people and taking them out for coffee to find out the values they live by, the struggles they've endured, and what advice and counsel they would give to others to better prepare themselves for the road ahead. And I don't really know what it is that you do, but I was intrigued by your car and you must be successful. And what the heck, I'd love to take you out for a cup of coffee. The guy looked at me and he said, I appreciate your request, but I'm not the guy you're looking for. I said, look, I just got done calling President Carter. It took me 3 months to get access to him. I appreciate your humility, but I'd really love to find out what you do, what you learned. He's like, I'd love to help you, but I'm really not interested. I said, oh man, come on, I just met all these incredible people. Just let me take you out for a cup of coffee. He said, look, I'm really not I think you've got me mistaken. I said, well, what do you mean I've got you mistaken? He said, well, this isn't even my car. And I said, what do you mean it's not your car? He said, well, I'm driving it for the person that owns it. I said, what do you do for the person? He said, well, I'm the head of security. I said, oh, well, whose car is it? And he said, well, I can't tell you that. I wouldn't be a very good head of security. I said, please, and I really spoke from my heart, and I really was authentic and real, and after a few more conversations in that day, we started talking, and I said, look, I really want to meet, whoever this person is. I'm sure he's got a great story. And he said, all right, well, he's very reclusive, not really interested in doing interviews, but I'll give you the office number. You can tell him that we spoke, and good luck to you. So, of course, the same journey, I had to call this office multiple times, eliminate doubt, convince them that I had a higher purpose that was valuable and meaningful and that I could deliver on that higher purpose. And then one thing led to another, and I had an opportunity to meet John Portman. Now, this one random little red Ferrari led me to one of the top world-renowned architects in the world. a total visionary. He's done many, many things. One thing that you all know is that he was the one that first created the atrium in a hotel. And when you come in, normally it was always like this, and then there were rooms above us. And he said, oh my gosh, he used New York as an example, and he said, when you're in New York with all that bustle and concrete and energy, what would you want more than anything in the world when you walked into a building? He said, you'd want to breathe. And so his vision for that was, he called them lungs for the city. And so that's why he created that waterfalls and that big, lots of trees, and it was a pioneering move, and now it's a standard all across the world. But that's just one thing that he did. We sat down and had a beautiful conversation. And when I asked him, well, what is your concern? What do you think that our society needs to know? And he said something that has been so profound for me. He said, we've been called many things. I deserve it, the me generation, so entitled, all kinds of stuff. He said, if I had an opportunity to label our society today, I would say that we are the rudderless boat society. He said that as a culture, we are living embodiment of designer boats. We have the nicest boats, designer sails, awesome cushions, flat screen TVs, technology, but we have no rudder. And he said, what happens to a boat without a rudder? It drifts. It is impacted by the elements. Now, you could be a captain of a boat, but if you don't have a rudder, current goes this way, you're going that way. Wind comes this way, you're going that way. Now, take it one step further. If we are rudderless, then we are being moved and maneuvered by people, situations, and it takes us and moves us around. We are not the captain of our own soul. We are not cutting through the water, doing what we want to do. I believe it is our birthright to live the life that it is what we are intended to do. And to do that means clarity and purpose and a depth, a rudder. I know you all are extremely successful, and I honor you for that. As I meditated about what I could bring to you today, as I talked to some of you over the last day, I thought, man, I want to make sure that besides being successful, are you fulfilled? Are you living the life that you want to live? Are you in the driver's seat of your destiny? Now, a rudder, what is that? I invite you to consider that the rudder is what you declare is your guiding principles. It is to ask yourself the fundamental questions, and not just ask yourself, define them, write them down, know them. We have a constitution. That constitution is what, when we lose our way, we come back, right or wrong, we come back to that constitution to give us value. What is your constitution? What is your definition of success? What is your definition of integrity? What is your definition of community, family, love, friendship? I assert to you that I see so many people succeeding in their lives, acquiring status and money and all that. And I want to know, do you know what it is that you really are after in the world? If you don't have those things defined for yourself, then how will you know when you've hit it? Courage, confidence, worthiness, those things come from you knowing who you are and you speaking it into existence and seeing it reflect back on you, and then you know it's successful. Nobody can tell you what success is. Not for you. Only you can declare what it is. And if you declare it and own it, and it happens, then you're going to purr like a kitten. Because you know it's happening. And that will give your life meaning, purpose, satisfaction, joy. You can bring that same level of clarity to your clients, to your family, to your children, to the society at large. Once you know what you stand for, then you can ask your clients, what do they stand for? And help guide them back to their own rudder. I believe wholeheartedly that is the significant question we can ask ourselves. Knowing what is important to you. Knowing what you define. There are guideposts all around us. I've spent my life talking to the wisest people in the land. But I needed to discover my definitions, then I could juxtapose my definition against really wise people. Sometimes I adjusted, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I declared something and 10 wise people said the exact same thing, and I knew that was right. I gained confidence because of my decision and choice to define what matters. You all have been, I've written a book, and I know as a gift for you all, you will have this book. And in this book are a list of questions. I invite you to take the time to define what matters to you. I believe that there's a direct correlation between each and every one of us knowing what it is that we stand for and what pushes and drives us to do what we do. Not philosophically, but in real time, that gives every one of us a tremendous amount of power and clarity. It will enable us to say yes with absolute confidence and to say no with absolute confidence to things that are not in alignment with what you believe in your heart. That is my request, that is my invitation, and I know that will be a direct correlation to living an extraordinary life. That being said, another person that I got a chance to meet who gave one of the best definitions of success. Now, I still want you to define what it is for you. But as I traveled, I tried to figure out what success was. And I met all these extraordinary people asking them, what's success? What is success? I learned a lot. I made a phone call to the president of the Ritz-Carlton. Arguably one of the most amazing CEOs in the world, has one of the best hotel chains of customer service in the world, met with presidents and kings and heads of state and Olympians and all kinds of people. And I remember calling him. I was at a campsite. And I called him and I said, hey man, I'd like to take you out for coffee. And he said, I'll do better than that. Why don't you come to my hotel and we'll have high tea? At that time, I didn't even know what that meant. But I realized that the Ritz-Carlton, you got to kind of dress up, and so I ended up going downtown. I didn't have 2 nickels at that time, and so I went to a clothier shop in Buckhead, which is in Georgia, and I met this guy who's Armenian. He had this really neat shop, and turns out he was an old filmmaker and loved what I was up to and said, hey man, I would love to support you, and he was kind enough to donate a suit to me. And so he gave me this Giorgio Armani suit, wingtip shoes, like just totally awesome. I'm at the campsite. I go into the bathroom. I'm putting on this suit. A couple next to me is like, what are you doing? I said, I'm gonna go have a high tea with the president of the Ritz-Carlton. Aren't you that guy in that bus? I said, yep. They go, and you could just see people don't believe. The courage to speak your possibility into the world. One has to endure being judged and ostracized and misunderstood. Most people want to do great and heroic things, but that feeling of being judged and that feeling of people just not thinking it's possible just crushes our spirit. But if you can hold and still believe, even in the face of non-agreement, knowing you're on point. So I took their cynicism. But I put on my suit and I drove to the Ritz-Carlton. And I would wish this upon everyone, to have the experience of rolling into the Ritz-Carlton. There's a Lamborghini, there's a Mercedes, and then there's me. I roll in, the valet dude's like, "You want me to park your car?" I'm like, "No way." He's like, "Well, why don't you pull over there?" He notices I've got a dog. He's like, "Can I get your dog a bowl of water?" This is awesome. I went in to go have high tea with the president of the Ritz. I turned to him and I said, "Mr. Schulte, you've met all these amazing people. What's your definition of success?" He said, "Eric, you probably think, like many people do, that success is in the future. It's not right now, it's in the future. I bet you think that if you keep doing what you're doing, get some good breaks, maybe somebody funds you, you make a movie, people like your movie, it's a hit, you'll be successful." I said, "Yep, that's exactly right." He said, "Nope." He said, "That's not where success lies." He said, "Success lies with you right now, doing today and every day excellently whatever it is you're doing. Then sooner or later, you may get a reward which you may interpret as success, but it's only a reward for doing excellently whatever it is you say you're going to do." It was a huge, just transformational moment for me. I had been living my life in a someday conversation. That means that I cannot be awesome, fully self-expressed, completely in my power, confident now. I can share some of those characteristics, but someday I'll be successful. And he reframed that and said, "No way. Right now, there is nowhere to get to. There is no someday conversation. This moment is it. And if you commit, if I commit, if we commit to doing excellently whatever it is that we say we're going to do, then we will be successful. Because we will get rewards that we will interpret as success, but they're only acknowledgments for your daily excellence. That is what we're celebrating you today, for your daily excellence. And I know 2015 is amazing, and you've now set your sights for 2016. And you folks are going to be even that much more successful." Another one of my favorite quotes: "A rising tide lifts all boats." You folks in this room are the cream of the crop. I invite you to now enjoy the journey where you're going, continue to be successful, but also look back. There's a lot of young people in this organization, more and more coming every day. Take time to mentor a few of them. Give back and help people know what you know. My whole journey has been about one single idea: to know the road ahead, ask those coming back. You folks know the road, and young people that are coming up would benefit from your wisdom, and you would benefit from their energy, their enthusiasm, and the companionship of being of service. And then I would like to invite you to take it even one step wider, and as an entire community, go help people that are less fortunate. We are all in this together. I am no better than you, you are no better than me, and we are all sharing air and water and land. A rising tide lifts all boats. Help everyone, and we help ourselves. And in closing, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, when asked what success meant to him, he said, "Success. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And you, my friends, are successful beyond measure. And it has been a privilege to spend time with you today. Aloha. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honored. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm honored.